Welcome, everyone. Let's begin with protocol.
E ho mai kai ke mai luna mai e o na mea huna no e au o na mele e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai kai ke mai luna mai e o na mea huna no e au o na mele e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai kai ke mai luna mai e o na mea huna no e au o na mele e ho mai e ho mai e ho mai
So, Dr. Noah Lincoln, old friend. We go back long time, many years, and is an assistant professor and researcher, I should say, too. You're a researcher at the College of Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources in UH Manoa, and one of our few folks really working on researching our starches, especially our focus on ulu. And Noah and Donna Shapiro are this dream team. I found that awesome picture of your family, Noah and Donna. So I just thought it would be a perfect way to have both of you on the same screen. So Noah's going to share with us some mo'olelo, some history, some botanical archaeology, whatever you want, Noah, about our Hawaiian starches. And I've made you co-host, so I'm going to stop sharing, and it's over to you. Mahalo, Noah.
Thank you. You know, when we think about, staples and starches in the Pacific wide, one of the things I would say is we have the same mix of crops, right? More or less throughout Polynesia and Micronesia, with the same kind of staples throughout, right? Kalo, sweet potato, yams, breadfruit, ape. And so these same starches are really found, throughout the Pacific, maia as well, right, our plantains. But the relative mix of them really changes from island to island. And a lot of that is kind of dictated by the island geography. So, as you get onto the atolls, right, you don't have necessarily surface water where you can do kalo cultivation. When you get into the really old steep islands like Marquesas, you see a lot of breadfruit because it's hard to cultivate the steep slopes of the islands. So, again, we have these kind of common starches throughout the Pacific, but we really see them play different importance and different roles as you go from island to island. And that's, again, really a lot of that is dictated by the island geography. And when we look at Hawaii, in terms of our mix of traditional starches, Hawaii is really quite unique in the Pacific in terms of our geography. Especially the Big Island, the young, sweeping volcanic plains that we have on Hawaii Island. That is not a common landscape in the Pacific. The youth of the landscape and the extent, the size of the landscape really provided Hawaii the opportunity to cultivate crops in a way that a lot of other Pacific islands couldn't. And yeah, we've like a lot of people, I think looked a lot at our history of agriculture and starches in Hawaii. And, I just kind of wanted to share some of my perspectives, and they are perspectives, right? Not trying to say that these are 100% true, but it's how I've interpreted a lot of the mo'olelo and history that I've engaged in. So when we look at the real ancient history of Hawaii, and Kane and Kanaloa, as the settlers, the very first Kanaka coming to the islands. And in this really early stage, there's a lot of stories about the Navao and the Mu people. And a lot of times you find them described as the Mu ai Maia, which literally means the banana eating Mu. And Luanu'u is also one of these very, very early ancestors that kind of commingled with the Mu people. And anyway, all the stories at this time are really around these forest-dwelling people. The Navao and the Mu, they're really, they're almost described as forest spirits, but they are clearly also, a people, much like the Menehune, they're kind of exist in this realm that's, part mythology, but also likely grounded, right, in true history and genealogy. So anyway, all these early descriptions of the people in Hawaii are these forest-dwelling, banana-eating people. And to me, this really says that when our ancestors, first hopped off the Va'a and first came to Hawaii, these were the first forms of staple agriculture they had. Because it takes a lot of effort, right, to start a lo'i. You have to clear the forest, and you have to build your terraces, and you have to divert the river, and you plant. And that takes a lot of time and effort and investment in the landscape. And when our ancestors first came, again, from these mo'olelo, to me, the first thing they did was they were basically, kind of clearing understory in the forest and planting banana. It's something that establishes really quick, it produces a lot of food, and it can grow in a forested ecosystem. So you don't need to clear the landscape and create ag, you're just kind of modifying the forest to start producing food. And so I really think Maia was our first major staple in Hawaii. Hopefully a lot of people know the story of, Papa and Wakea and Haloa as the birth of Kalo. And what's fascinating to me is, we often think of Papa and Wakea purely as deities. But if you look in the genealogies and Kehau Kachola Abad's dissertation highlighted this really well, Papa and Wakea occur in the genealogical record as people, as Kanaka. And Wakea as a leader, as an ali'i, is not only associated with Haloa, he's associated with several other accomplishments in his life. This includes the first system of land divisions. So a lot of people know, Maili Kukahi, the famous Oahu chief, is credited with the Ahupua'a system. But Wakea developed a land division system before that, probably the Moku system, the regional system that we still have. Wakea is also credited with the Aikapu, the taboo on eating. And specifically, one of the key parts of the Aikapu is forbidding women to eat most banana, most Maia. And then, of course, you have his association with Haloa. And so again, how I interpret this from kind of a socio-political evolution standpoint is that during the time of Wakea, who was about I think it's the 12th generation in the Hawaiian genealogy, Wakea emerges as a great leader. He greatly organizes the population. He, creates these land divisions. And I believe under Wakea, you probably saw large mobilization of labor, creation of lo'i, and large-scale establishment of kalo. And again, you see the emergence of the aikapu, forbidding women to eat bananas. And so I really think during the time of Wakea, we shifted from a banana-based diet to a kalo-based diet moving forward. And then we see huge investments into lo'i and establishment of kalo cultivation, all over the islands. And then we see these late stage introductions of crops into Hawaii. So for instance, there's really good evidence in the mo'olelo and in the archaeology that ulu was not on the first va'as to come to Hawaii. And there's all the stories about ulu. They involve somebody leaving the islands to go get it. Kaha'i is the most famous story where he sails from Hawaii down to Upolu and gets ulu and brings it back to the island. But there's a whole bunch of introduction stories for ulu. Some involve fishermen who are blown off course to the mythical island of Hawaiʻi, where they were given ulu by Lono and brought it back. There's an interesting story of a mythical niu tree that grew all the way up to the sky, and they climbed the niu tree up, and they got so high the niu tree bent over and landed on the island of Hawaiʻi, where again, they got ulu and brought it back to Hawaii. So all these stories talk about, oh, ulu wasn't here. At some later time, they went and got it and brought it back. And same for the sweet potato, uala, was clearly a late introduction, where we don't think uala was introduced to Hawaii probably until like 1250 or so. But with these later introductions of uala and ulu, it allowed the cultivation of drier landscapes that kalo couldn't grow in very well. And so in the later stages, of our ancestors' society here, we see these huge expansions of ulu and uala cultivation, especially on the leeward sides of the younger islands, Maui and Hawaiʻi. And, it doesn't supplant kalo, but it certainly added a big mixture to our staples in the past. And so we see uala and ulu become more important in the later stages of our Hawaiian kingdom. I just want to then maybe set Donna up here by talking a little bit about our local food situation. So we all know, right, we import 85 to 90% of our local food. But the situation to me is actually more dire when you look at it in categories. So if you look at our local production, it's not evenly distributed. A lot of our local production is fresh fruits and vegetables, and to a lesser extent, proteins. And look at our grains, 0%. And in fact, when we look at staple carbohydrate production in Hawaii, the estimate is that we produce less than 0.5% of our local carbohydrates. So we import 99.5% of our local starches that are consumed. And so when we look at, our classic food pyramid, right? And I know this concept is outdated, but it's still useful. Carbs are the base of our food period. That's what feeds people. That's our energy. That's our calories. But when we look at local production, it looks like this. We do pretty good on fruits and vegetables. We produce about 50% of our fruits and vegetables locally, a small amount of protein, but basically 0% of our local carbs, right? And so, yeah, so our carb situation is horrible. You know, we have the highest rice consumption per capita in the US at about 100 pounds of rice per person per year in Hawaii. We import 140 million pounds of rice a year. We import 50 million pounds of potatoes a year. And yet, even our local staples, we're not producing enough locally. So we actually import kalo into the state for poi milling. We don't, you know, even though the demand for kalo is pretty small, we don't even produce that, you know, locally. So when we look at our starches and our carbohydrates, you know, it's a really, really, really bad situation. And again, just to set Donna up here, you know, we see ulu cultivation growing, and there's, you know, 4 times as many trees in the ground right now as are productive. So there's maybe 2,000 trees productive on farms, but there's 8,000 trees in the ground on farms. So those 6,000 trees, they're just young. They're less than 4 years old, and so they're not producing fruit yet. So we know breadfruit production in the state's gonna like quadruple, even if nobody plants another tree. And everyone's always like, oh, isn't that gonna saturate the market? Like, God, you guys are gonna, you know, 4 times as much breadfruit. Like, where are we gonna eat all that? Where's it gonna go? I'm like, that's gonna bring us up to like 500,000 pounds of breadfruit. Like, that's 1% of our potato imports. And you're talking about that's too much local carb production. Like, it's just, I don't know, it's crazy. So yeah, so with that, I will turn it over to Donna to share a bit about their contribution to our local starch production and distribution.
Yay, thank you so much, Noah. Wow. But so some of you who may not know, and I put in the chat box, Maya is bananas. So at some point we were on some kind of banana diet, which is so interesting. I know bananas were not included in your Ilima box, but we will be doing something soon about starches from fruits. And now it's Donna's here. It's my great pleasure to introduce Donna Shapiro. Donna is one of the co-founders and now manages the Hawaiʻi Ulu Co-op and is instrumental to bringing ulu, especially into our schools, into our school lunches. So mahalo, Donna, for joining us. And some of you got to meet Donna. She was helping distribute the boxes yesterday. And so thank you so much for all the time and effort to support this webinar.
An absolute pleasure. Thank you, Mingwei. Can everyone hear me? Okay, thank you. So thank you for the intro. I don't have to introduce myself anymore, but I'll give you a super quick background on the co-op and then maybe just explain the Ilima box a little bit. Sorry, we have 2 young children screaming in the background. So the co-op was formed 4 years ago, and it really grew out of a restoration project that Noah and I started in 2015, which was restoring about 4 acres in the Kalu Ulu belt in South Kona, which was one of the famous ulu-based agroforestry systems in the state. And you know, all over Kona, there's ulu, and the older trees are remnant trees from the traditional system because ulu propagates itself vegetatively through the root system. So even though our farm was only founded in 2015, we had about a dozen mature ulu trees that were these offspring of the original Hawaiian ulu trees in the region. And so we immediately had fruit to sell. And we immediately found that selling fresh ulu is extremely challenging, nearly impossible because of the short shelf life. And so we partnered up with John Cadman of the Maui Breadfruit Company, a dear friend, and he taught us his technique of simply steaming and freezing. Nothing cutting edge about it, but brilliant in that it preserves the fruit for year-round consumption in a very high quality form, ulu freezes very well because it's such a dense starch. And after doing that, we found that a single farm really just didn't have anywhere near enough supply. I mean, even a couple thousand pounds a year just doesn't go very far. That's like a few large meals at a restaurant. And so my background is in co-op development. Sorry, Leia, Mama's on a meeting. And we found that, oh, sorry, lost my train of thought. So because my background was in co-ops, we saw the opportunity for just a farmer co-op in the ulu sphere to really help advance the industry. And so we did a bunch of networking, just word of mouth exploration, and I identified 15 to 20 farms that were potentially interested. And after a few community meetings, 9 core farms wanted to move forward with establishing the co-op, and that was the beginning. And now we have about 85 members located all over the Big Island, a couple in East Maui. Actually, one of our Maui members is starting to process on Maui, so they're doing their second pilot of Maui processing today. And I think that everything that Noah said was right on, so I won't repeat that. But that was really, that foundation was our inspiration for creating the Ilima box, which you've all either received or will receive soon. And the co-op started diversifying in 2018, not away from ulu, but expanding to several other crops in addition to ulu. And that was really made possible through our partnership with the Department of Education. We began selling to DOE in, I think, March of 2018, and then did a large Harvest of the Month distribution in October of 2018. And then we were able to work with them and get ulu on the regular menu. And so for the last school year, ulu was on the regular menu rotation for the first time, which was really exciting. But because DOE was really looking at other local crops, we were able to work with our growers and identify several other starches like sweet potato and kalo and squash that DOE was interested in, and they really enabled us to pilot with other crops.
Mama, can we
Saturday morning, what can I say? No, Leia, not right now. So the Ilima box is our version of a starch mix for Hawaii. Of course, it's all grown and processed here locally. The cassava is grown and processed by our co-op members, Sweet King Cafe in Papaico, and we process the rest. So with that, I will turn it back over to Mingwei, unless anyone has questions, and I'm happy to take up a question or two.
Donna, can you also share how people can be subscribers to the Ilima box?
Yeah, absolutely. Leia, you're stealing my screen. So the Ilima box and all of our products are now available on our website, eatbreadfruit.com. And I just want to say that, the pandemic has, of course, been very challenging for all of us. And for the co-op, we lost almost all of our customers. DOE was a big part, but restaurants, hotels, even hospitals stopped buying for a while. So we had to diversify our market and look at different ways of distributing our ulu and other crops, and e-commerce, of course, is where a lot of people are shopping right now. And so if the pandemic hadn't happened, I don't even think that our website would have had a functional online store. And so if there is a silver lining, I will say that the situation has really forced us to build relationships with everyday eaters instead of only selling commercially wholesale. And that has been a real blessing. Just seeing ulu get on the table any time of day for just so many ordinary people, not high-end chefs and not institutional kitchens, has been just extremely gratifying. And I think, we've probably supplied several thousand households And I think the impact of that, when you think about really shifting consumer behavior in Hawaii, I think that's ultimately a lot more impactful than getting ulu into one institutional kitchen that might serve several thousand people. That experience of cooking the food and touching the food and going through the process of ordering it, I think ultimately will have a much more powerful impact on individuals' behavior.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Donna. I'm seeing some awesome comments about shifting consumer behavior, and we look towards the Hawaii Ulu Co-op for models. And I'm so excited that there's so many youth on our call today. Everyone, a big shout out to our young people on the call today. We have quite a good number, close to 15 young people on our call today, calling from the whole state. And so to the youth, thinking of new ways to create businesses that are cooperative, where we work together for a common goal, and we help each other. That's the old way. That's the way that Noah was sharing in the past. That's how we built lois and all that. And so as we move forward with agricultural-based businesses, I want all of us to consider how we can do this cooperatively so that we can support young farmers and our young keiki. So yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you so much, Noah. Shout out to Noah and Donna. Thank you for giving up your Saturday morning. And if there are any more questions, I'll pick it up from the chat box and forward it to you. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha. So I just want to be just so grateful again for that family and all the time and effort they're putting into this amazing work. But now I want to turn our attention to learning how to grow. What do these starches actually look like growing? You got them in the box and they're all beautifully recipe ready. So I would love to introduce one of my oldest friends on island, Amanda Ryu. Amanda is the second friend I made on this island. 14, 15 years ago, I can't remember. We had dinner together, and Amanda is the executive director for Mala'ai Culinary Garden in Waimea. It's next to the Waimea Middle School, the charter school. She's also the Hawaii Island School Garden Network director. And this is a picture, I hope you can see it, of Amanda in the beautiful Mala'ai garden. This is from several years ago, but you can see the diversity in there. So I'm going to stop sharing, and then Amanda, I've made you host. So over to you, Amanda, to teach us more about growing, caring, and harvesting our Hawaiian starches.
Wonderful. Aloha mai kako. My name is Amanda Ria, as Mingwei said. I'm thrilled to be here. It's so great to hear from Noah and Dana. I learn every time. There's lots to learn and know. So typically, I work with people in person. So this is a stretch for me, but I'm excited to do this today for you. And as Mingwei said, she's one of my oldest friends on island, and we've collaborated now probably, 15 years in this kind of work. It's a thrill to have people from across the state interested and thinking about our local food production, and especially these crops in particular. I'm going to do a hybrid between actually speaking to you and showing you crops and showing you a slideshow. So right now I'm going to move over to share my screen so that you can see my slideshow. Why isn't it doing it? So, he keiki aloha na mea kanu. Beloved children are the plants. And today we're going to talk about some of the Hawaiian starch crops. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble with my controls here. Here we go. All right. So first I just wanted to talk about kalo, Colocasia esculenta, or taro. And one of the reasons I'm here, I'm sorry, I forgot to say where I am. I'm in Waimea on the Big Island, and I'm in my home garden on Pu'opelu. And behind you, you can see my little mala kalo, so you can see it growing. Kalo or taro is grown all around the world, we believe its origins are in Asia, and it's eaten as far as India. It's a plant that is obviously very important for the Hawaiians. It's the origin plant in the origin story is kalo, or haloa makalau kapalili. And you can kind of see in the windy Waimea, you can see the leaves over there quivering. It's a beautiful and very important plant. Grows all over Hawaii. Here, I'm gonna take this off. So kalo grows all over Hawaii. It will grow in mala, dryland gardens, and it will also grow in lo'i, or in like a water plane. And you see that, I think traditionally people think of it growing in the lo'i, but it grows all over Hawaii. I think of the many varieties that we have. I know that there are over 80 Hawaiian varieties left, and we believe that pre-contact there were over 300 from what I understand. Uncle Jerry Konanui said that his favorite kind of kalo was whatever kalo was on his table. And I love to think of him sitting at my table telling me that. So I wanted to just talk a little bit more about the plant itself. And here is, and so this will kind of relate to the box that you have. You can see it growing here in a dryland mala behind me. And here is the corm. This is the part that we're talking about today. Although you can eat the entire plant, the ha, or the breath, the stem is edible, and the beautiful lau, or leaf, is also delicious and edible. I've read that you could live off of kalo alone. So there you can sort of see that. I see many friends on this call, so I imagine that many of you know a lot about this. But for those of you who may not recognize what's in your box and where it's coming from, this is a good introduction to it. What you can see on this kalo that I pulled this morning is you can see that it has this little oha, or a keiki, that comes up from it. And this one was ready to harvest out of the middle of the plant today. And the way that I knew that is that the keiki were coming out, larger keiki were coming out, and the leaves of this plant were getting lower, so that it would allow for sun for the babies that were coming around, around the edges of it. Let's see. The way that you propagate kalo typically is by a huli. So that would be to cut the corm that we would be eating off, and then cut off the leaves. And this is an asexual propagation. And you can see there's a huli for you. Is that, Mingwei, is that close up? Can you see it? Okay.
Yes, perfect. And DJ just commented, what a great way to teach asexual reproduction.
Truly, but I did want to show something else, because this I found today also when I pulled it. So kalo can be bred, and you can actually see this is a flower that came right off of the base. It was right up here coming off of the base of this guy like this. And so this is a kalo flower, and we can actually cross-pollinate it and reproduce it, although typically when we're planting it, we use it asexually. And kalo, as Noah mentioned, also was a canoe crop. Usually it takes 6 to 7 months before it's ready to eat. And as I said, again, you know it's ready to harvest. You'll see the corms forming in the middle. So you'll see the corm kind of forming in the middle of the plant. And you'll notice that the leaves on the central corm are getting smaller, and the oha, or the keiki around it, are starting to grow out. Let's see. When you harvest it, you can store it in a cool, dry place for a couple of weeks. I think that probably when we see huge mala or huge kalo lo'i, that is a more modern tradition, because I imagine that people grew it and harvested it kind of progressively, as opposed to doing huge malas, because it doesn't store that well. You can refrigerate it, you can make it into poi, and it will store as pa'iai or poi for a while. But you can also, as you see from your ilima box, freeze it. And so this is what will be in your ilima box today. Is essentially something that comes from that. And you can see on this one, you see the white flesh of this particular variety on the inside. Kalo, as I think I mentioned, is the plant that is the elder brother to man in the Hawaiian creation story. It is very important crop here. It is very diverse. It's also delicious. And as I said, you can eat all parts of it. Does anybody have any questions? Mingwei, will you let me know if there's any questions in the chat box?
Yes, I will. So far, they're just really positive comments, and I will let you know.
Okay, thank you. Next, I wanted to just share with you a little about Uala. And I actually think I'm not going to go back to the slideshow if that's okay with you guys, because is that okay? I think it's too difficult. So Uala, or Ipomea botatas, is a sweet potato. Its origin is in South America, as many of the potato type crops are. Again, I know it as a canoe crop. Here is a pot of it growing. It has a leaf that will change whether you grow it in full sun or partial sun. It can grow in both places. It really likes to grow in soft soil, and I've had the experience of trying to grow it in rocky soil, hard soil, down near the ocean, and I got a lot of leaf growth, but no fruit growth. So it needs a soft soil. The leaf is also edible. Today we'll mostly be talking about the root or the tuber. And what I have here are some different. So these are different leaves. So this is a leaf from a different variety, and you can see this one was growing in full sun also. And you see how it has like a kind of a thinner, spinier leaf. This one is from probably the Okinawan purple one. And here is another leaf. So the leaf varies. It grows along the ground, and it will kind of ramble every 2 months or so. It's nice to wind the vines back up onto themselves, and that encourages them to send all of their energy into the tubers that are on their original planting. And as I said, often we plant them in mounds. Here's a mature uala. This is a white one, and here's a little one, and you can see that the skin is red. Again, we have many different varieties of it. When we propagate it, I was hoping I would get some roots for you, but they didn't come quite yet. We do stem cuttings, and so you actually take a vigorous tip off of the vine, you break a few of the leaf nodes off, and you can either put them directly in water and directly in the soil and keep it moist, or you can put them in water and root them first. Although I find that it works well to just put them in the soil and keep it moist. And again, it's good to plant them in mounds. When you harvest them, you can store them again in a cool, dry place. You can harvest them progressively. And when you do harvest a plant, it's good to harvest the whole thing after a certain amount of time so that you don't get the weevils in your soil, because they'll start to destroy your potato crop over time. And then actually I am going to go back to my slideshow because I just wanted to show you a picture of the Kohala field system. Oh wait, first I wanted to show you the flower. Here we go. Can you see my desktop? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the flower. One of the ways that you know the uala is ready to harvest is when you start to see the flower, and you see it has that beautiful flower on it. And this is a picture of the Kohala field system, and Noah mentioned this also in his talk this morning. The Kohala field system on the west side of the Kohala Mountain spans for many miles, and you can see these terraces. These terraces are where Hawaiians were growing uala and also probably sugarcane together. And there you can see apparently these lines even from satellites. We were growing a lot of food in this dry land system. And there's actually a project now up in North Kohala called Ulu Mau Puanui, and they are using their best efforts to try to recreate how the Hawaiians did that. And this is Kehau Marshall up there who's growing. You can see the line of uala. Those are just cuttings that she's put in the ground recently. So they are actually doing a really beautiful project trying to figure out how it was that without irrigation, these hugely productive fields were being grown up in North Kohala. And I know that right now we're having a drought. I talked to Kehau Marshall yesterday about putting her in the slideshow. And so I know that they're having a drought, and they're watching the water line on that field system. They're watching the dry water line move up the mountain. Okay, let me see. So next I wanted to talk to you a little bit about ulu. And ulu doesn't actually grow in Waimea. Well, the plant will grow, but it doesn't fruit. It also is called breadfruit, and ulu is a plant that's seen all around Polynesia. We believe that it originated somewhere in the South Pacific. It grows kind of its sweet spot, I think, is between 800 and 1,000 feet. It will grow in a much wider range. And I've seen it fruit near to Waimea at about 2,200 feet. And here you see both the fruits, the small fruits, the more mature one in the back and the less mature one in the front, and a flower, and the very distinctive leaf of ulu. The tree can grow to over 80 feet. This is a farmer on Big Island, Yuri, and he's standing in front of one of his ulu trees that's about 13 or 14 years old. And you can see how terrifically productive it is. And when you look into stories all over Polynesia, the idea of having an ulu tree is food security. It provides abundance and even a sense of calm for a family to have an ulu tree. The way that we propagate it is through air layering or sprouts that come out from the ground on the tree. Ulu fruits don't have nuts. If you find an ulu that has what looks like a seed in it, it's probably a bread nut. Yeah, the trees bear in 5 to 6 years, and they will get between 175 and 250 fruits, depending on the tree and the environment. So you can imagine that that's tremendous food security for any community or even an extended family. And the fruits last for, the trees will fruit for up to 50 years. So you can see that there's a nice up close picture. A fun thing about ulu is that it's monoecious. That means that on each tree, it has both male and female flowers. And you can kind of see that in the picture that they are, that they're very different structurally. Again, this is great for teaching asexual and sexual reproduction. And the part that we eat is the fruit. And this tree is just such a beautiful example of the bounty of an ulu. Oops, go back. And I was just gonna show you the very distinctive leaf that you see. It's often an image that we see in art because the leaf is so distinctive. On the front it's green, and on the underside it's much lighter, and you can see the veins. And here is an immature ulu, and you see that the bumps are raised on it. You can kind of see that. You see it's fairly small when you look at it compared to my cat. And here I have a mature ulu, and this one is just perfect, ready to eat. This is a dwarf Tahitian that a friend brought me from her farm on Hamakua. And you can see that these, can you see this? That the bumps have started to flatten out a little bit. And you start to see that there's a little bit of latex. It's still firm to the touch, which means that it's not very sweet yet. You can eat it at different phases, but this one is about ready to cook. Ulu is difficult to store, as Donna mentioned. One of the tricks that I've learned that prolongs the storage a little bit is to take an ulu and to immerse it in cold water, completely immerse it, just for less than 10 minutes. And then that just sort of slows down the ripening process, not too much, maybe a day or two. But peeling it and then steaming it and freezing it is an excellent way to prolong it. You can also make flour out of it. When I was working with Ohana Va'a on Big Island recently to provision the va'a for the voyage a couple of summers ago, we were making a lot of ulu flour, and Rod Floro and his kids at KS made a whole bunch of steamed and freeze-dried ulu. That was one of the main crops, one of the main foods that they took with them on the voyage. And I will say that when the voyagers came back and talked about what it was like to eat food only from Hawaiʻi Island on their entire voyage, one of the things that really resonated with them that I heard over and over again was that eating traditional starch crops, eating traditional Hawaiian foods every day as part of their diet was really a profound experience in a whole bunch of ways, physically as well as spiritually, and really connecting them to their ancestors. But okay, that's ulu. Any of these crops really we could talk about for days and days. I'm gonna go back to sharing my screen and show you a little bit about cassava. Screen share.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of questions about varieties for different conditions. And we didn't have time to ask Noah that, so I'm collecting all those questions, and that's exactly what Noah got a pretty nice grant to research, everyone. So I will be asking him, and I think that they even want to make a poster where it shows different climate zones and which varieties will grow where and how. And then there was a great question about a picker. I want as Amanda is looking for that. Evelyn Joseph, do you have a picture of a mare picker, a breadfruit picker? If you do, maybe you can find it and we can share it later. But Marshallese breadfruit picker. Okay, thank you, Amanda.
Yeah, are you able to see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm sorry, I'm not able to look at the chat box also. I think the question about the variety is interesting with the, you can see the one that I have may not be the ulu that you're used to seeing. We're gonna go on to tapioca or cassava. It's also called manioc. Yucca in it again is a starch crop that's eaten around the world. It originates around the Amazon in South America. And I'm gonna just show you the next picture here because you can sort of see for scale. So there you see the leaf. There are several varieties. There's a yellow variety and a red variety. I put my slipper in my neighbor's tapioca field there so you can kind of see for scale how big it is. It gets 8 to 10 feet. In Waimea, usually it doesn't get above 8 feet at the most. And it is a crop that you can put in the ground and really use for long-term food security because it grows slowly and you can harvest it progressively. You don't have to harvest it all at once. You can usually start to harvest it between 9 and 12 months. When you propagate it, by a stem cutting, and you really, one of the things, this is one of the plants that you want to be sure that you actually stick it in the ground the right way when you make a stem cutting. My trick is to cut the bottom side at an angle and the top at a flat cut. So a 6-inch to 8-inch cutting is how you would propagate the cassava or the tapioca. And it is a plant that can grow in varied conditions. It can grow in very harsh conditions. It likes water, but it will grow in, it'll grow in dry conditions. It likes full sun. It'll grow in partial shade. When you plant it, it's nice if you can plant it into a mound because sometimes the roots get to be enormous. I have the base of one that I harvested from. So this is tricky, but you can see I'm holding the stem for this older one that I harvested from, and you're looking at it from the bottom as if you were an earthworm looking up. And you can see that the tuber right here comes off of the base stem, and you can see all the directions that these roots were going were where the tubers were coming off. And so if you can harvest it if you can plant it in a mound, it actually makes it easier for harvesting it. And again, you can harvest it progressively. You don't have to harvest it all at one time. So for what you got in your box, here's the tuber. When you take it off, that one is part of a tuber. Inside of each tuber, on the outside is a skin, and you can see that skin. You need to peel the skin back before you can see the tuber.
Hold up the really big, long, and the moundy thing. Yes, thank you.
Here's the plant that I pulled out.
Yeah.
And here you can see there's your earthworm view of the tuber, and you can see the way from this central stalk that all of these roots come off. And that's why it's nice to plant it in a mound so that it's easier to harvest it. I've had them go down as far as 2.5 feet in the ground when they get really big. So if you can put it into loose soil or into a mound, it makes it easier to harvest it when it's time to get it out. It's a really fun one to harvest with kids, because sometimes you get enormous tubers from it. Sorry, did I also not show you the stem cutting too? Do you need to see that or not? The stem, so this is the stem cutting. And that's how we would propagate it. And so here's the tuber that you'll find in your box. And the outside has a skin on it like this. You can see that. And in the middle, on this piece, I think you can see it, there's a core. Do you see that core? You also need to take the core out because it's very woody. You don't want to eat it. And I believe the ones that we have in the Alima box are grated, which makes them really ready to eat. And so what you would literally do is peel this all the way off and take your grater and just grate it, and you can make it into hash browns or tapioca. I think we'll probably have some fun recipes with it today. A fun fact about cassava is, here's the leaf, is that the leaf is also edible, and it's high in protein. It's up to 25% protein by weight. A very important fact about all of the cassava, whether it be the root or the leaf, is that it is poisonous if you don't cook it. It has cyanide in it. There are places in the world where people eat a lot of cassava, and there are names for the syndrome that happens when people eat it without cooking it because they're desperate for firewood. You really need to be sure that you cook it. But once you cook it, it's a wonderful food. And as I said, it's very versatile. It lasts a long time in the ground. In a lot of tropical places, people leave it in the ground because it will also survive the storm underground if there's a huge hurricane, and they can dig it out when they're hungry at that time. So that's cassava. And last but not least, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about kabocha, or pumpkin. I'm going to share my screen one more time. And, okay. In this picture, you can see Auntie Holly in Malaʻi at Waimea Middle School, and in front of her, there in the blue shirt, you see the pumpkin, or the kabocha, trailing forward. Kabocha is a very versatile plant, and it grows, it will seek out sun, and it will cover the ground. And so that may only be rooted in 1 or 2 places, that may be just a few plants that you see there. The other thing that it can do that is super interesting is that it will, so here I'm going to show you, there's Holly holding a green kabocha, and you can see on that fruit that there's a little bit of a white film around it. You see that it's not super shiny, which means that you could already start to harvest that one to eat. And here she has 2 at different levels of ripeness. Kabocha is a cucurbit. It's a winter squash, and it is what we like to call promiscuous. So very often it crosses with other winter squash. And that's why when you see them from plant to plant, they're very often slightly different from each other. Here's another picture of kabocha growing in a different place. This kabocha you can see is hanging. Do you see the one on the right is actually hanging down? And so you can sort of see the shape. You can see in the leaf of the kabocha, one of the telltale signs for it is that it has that variegation, those little white flecks that are in it. And this picture is great because I think it shows you how the fruit itself mirrors the leaf, which is kind of unusual. And here it is at a bigger, you can see it's growing on somebody's head, the kabocha. I'm gonna stop the screen share. All right, so the kabocha that you have in your kit probably looked something like this beforehand. The way that we propagate kabocha is from seed, and you can also eat the seeds. We've had very good luck with taking seeds that aren't super mature, cleaning them, and then putting them with a little bit of salt water and roasting them, and you can actually eat the outside of the seed that way as well. We do that for kids in the garden at Malaʻi. And you can see that this one kabocha could plant fields and fields of kabocha. So if you are growing them, if you get a whole one, I would encourage you, every time you open one, save a handful of those seeds. The reason you don't want to just save seeds from one is you want to maintain the diversity you have by saving seeds from different fruits, especially if you're going to plant them and share them over time. So you can see that on this one fruit, there's a ton of food. I find that I get about a cup of flesh per pound, maybe 2 cups of flesh, like between a cup and 2 cups per pound when you take them whole off of the plant. It takes anywhere between maybe 60 and 75 days before you start to get fruit. They grow very fast. You also can leave the vines and let them grow over time. Often they'll root and keep growing. I have one in my garden behind me that is rambling, and it's just hard to show it with my computer to you, but the ones that I have are growing slightly different. You see these ones are not squashed. They've obviously been promiscuous and crossed with somebody else in the neighborhood, but these are an incredible again, an incredible plant to plant for food security. I've talked to people from around the world who eat kabocha. These are delicious. They make delicious pies. They make delicious curries. They're delicious roasted. I talked to an auntie from Jamaica who said that when rebels in Jamaica went into the hills, they grew and lived on kabocha because it was such a incredibly productive and generous plant. If you're interested in knowing more about squash, especially in Hawaii, there's a woman named Anna Peach who's done a beautiful project called Squash and Awe, A-W-E, like it's amazing. And she has a great website with all kinds of information about kabocha and other squash that grow here in Hawaii, but she has a ton of information about specifically kabocha. And that's it. I'm at 11 o'clock exactly.
We rock. We've been right on time. So Amanda, a few questions. Back to cassava especially. I think you kind of answered the fact about the mounding and that makes it easier to grow. But the other question was, what do you do after, you said you could just harvest a little bit at a time. After you harvest, do you put the soil back? What do you do?
That's a really good question. Usually I do put the soil back so that I can encourage the other roots that are near to that. So if I had taken this, can you see this? Yeah, if I had taken this, it's really big. It doesn't stand up under my tree, but then maybe I'd taken this one, then I would be sure that the soil is back around it to encourage it to keep growing. The other thing is that if you harvest too much from one side, it becomes unstable. So you also put the soil back around it so it doesn't fall, so it won't fall over, right? Because I don't know if you noticed that the roots came down, they came down like this, and then they went out in all the directions from the stem, which would create stability in the plant. So if you harvest too much from one side, your plant's going to be unstable that way. Any other questions?
Yes, one more about cassava, because I think that is quite the plant that people have the most questions about. But last one on cassava, do you have to cook it after you grate it? Absolutely. Or do you have to cook it before you grate it?
Oh no, you don't need to cook it before you grate it. It freezes beautifully. You can also just steam it and freeze it, or just cut it and freeze it. You do need to cook it though, whether it's grated or frozen or not. There are different varieties. Some have less cyanide in them, but it's important always to cook it. So yes, and I think the thing about grating it is that it just increases the surface area, so it would break down the cyanide more quickly when it cooks because it heats through more quickly, just because literally by the nature of the pieces being so small.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Amanda. That was so engaging and so fun. You're right. We could do a whole webinar on each plant, and that's cross fingers. Maybe we'll be able to do that. Everyone, I want to give you a 5-minute break. And during this break, maybe if you want to start, if those of you who want to cook along with Chef Erica, you can move your computer closer to your kitchen or something. Maybe get a knife and a cutting board and a couple of pots and pans ready, maybe some oil and the usual salt and pepper or whatever. But everybody take a 5-minute break and be back at, oh, it's a weird time, but 11:08. All right, everybody take a 5-minute break and we'll see you in 5 minutes. Mahalo. Thank you, Amanda. That was awesome.
That was fun.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like so excited now to think about like giving each crop, you know, maybe two crops per webinar instead of squishing 5.
It would be nice to go a little bit deeper into it. There's a couple questions I didn't answer, like how to harvest it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, the one I was thinking, it wouldn't be fun to be doing starches from roots and then starches from fruits. Totally. Like divided that way, it'd be really a fun way to organize.
Above and below, like pole.
Yeah, above and below, exactly, as above, so below kind of thing, you know. Yeah. And yeah.
Oh, the darkness and the light. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like how does that happen? So yeah, there was some mostly. Then there was a lot of questions about ulu variety, so I tossed that one in. And then planting in containers for the cassava, which is a yes, you know, definitely.
It needs a big container.
Yeah, that's what I said. Try big trash cans kind of thing. And I don't know if Evelyn is still here, if she does have a picture of a harvester. Evelyn Joseph, are you still here? Let's see if she's, pick on her. She might have, I mean, I see her name, but she might have gone to take a break. Ah, yay, Deb and Calais, hi.
Hi.
Hey.
Amanda, can you quickly clarify something about harvesting cassava? We always pulled, my Tongan friend always pulled the whole plant out. Did you just say you could cut pieces one at a time and leave it in?
I do that because I don't eat it all the time, and I try to keep it around for food security, right? And
I didn't realize that.
what that does is that just allows, also you don't end up with a ton at once. I don't eat it all the time. It's like the one of these crops that I eat probably the least, but I like to have it because, you know, I feel like I've got food in the ground with it. So yeah, you can. And the one that I harvested the whole thing this time for the samples for the workshop has been in the ground for 3 or 4 years. And but you could take, you know, I've taken like one big one off or another big one off, and it grows less vigorously when you do that. I think Waimea's, it will grow in Waimea. It's not like its favorite place. It's a little bit cold for it.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, sorry.
It does grow. So yeah.
I was just picturing how you dig down and find the root, like how you, but it's all good. Wait, there's a question from Amy Brinker about
how long to cook. I don't have an answer for you on that, but you need to cook it through. And if you picture like cooking the grated, kind of like kalo, similar, although the toxin is different. Yeah, yes, it is like that. But when you cook it like kalo, or even like if you were cooking a white potato that was grated, once you cook it through, you see it sort of changes color a little bit, and that's what you'll see with the cassava also, is that it will, I notice that it goes from like opaque to like almost like a more clear color. Does that seem right? Was that how you would describe it, Deb?
Yeah. Like more transparent, yeah. Mm-hmm. And kind of a more yellowish. Ah, yeah. Right.
Morning, Miss Warren.
Oh, hi.
Hi, Wendy Baker.
Good morning, all you guys. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you.
Thanks for being here, Aiden. Aiden is my student in Garden to Grinds, and we're really stoked that he's here.
Awesome. Thank you for being here.
Wonderful. You have a couple of other students too, don't you, Wendy?
Yeah, but I didn't see her on the call.
Okay.
It was so fun. I can't wait to cook together.
Jenny Pell, I have had people tell me that they like to plant it sideways and that it's easier to harvest, but I honestly haven't found a difference. As long as I don't, if I put the cutting really deep in the ground, then they tend to start lower down. But I haven't found a difference from planting it sideways. But my neighbor whose patch I took a picture of, he swears by planting it sideways. So I think, I'm sorry, I don't know. And it may be different depending on what the quality of your soil is, if it's hard and compact and rocky, or if it's looser. Vertically, yeah, that's what I think too, Deb. 3 or 4, yeah, that's true. I have seen a bunch of people who planted a lot, who put many in a mound too with the cassava, Jenny.
Yeah, okay, I think we are slowly gathering everyone back. As we gather, I just wanted to share with everyone our Hawaii Farm to School Hui website. And the Hawaii Farm to School Hui is made up of all networks from all the islands. And it's a program under the Hawaii Public Health Institute. And what I really wanted to share with many of you, because we have Ohana, we have parents on this call, we have many educators on this call. What I really, really wanted to share with you was some of these resources we have on this website for you know, now that we're distance learning, we have some curriculum. So I'm trying to show you, like if you click on resources, so you get to the website, you click on the resources. I hope it's showing up. Oh, internet's slow because all of you are on my Zoom. Just kidding. So we have many resources on our Farm to School website, including monthly talk stories. So we just get and talk stories, different contests and information. And then we have resources during school closures. So we have home cooking ideas. I bet you're going to learn a bunch more with Chef Erica in just a few minutes. Home gardening ideas. Some information about invasive species and, food safety, and then more resources for remote learning. So really want to welcome you, and then you can see we're going on and on and on. So just wanted to share with you the resources that can be found on the Hawaii Farm to School Hui website, and it's a program of the Hawaii Public Health Institute, and they are also our partners for these webinars, and that's how we're getting such an amazing statewide reach thanks to this networks. Without any further ado, I think she's ready. And now I'm going to focus my attention on Miss Erica. So Erica is another old friend. I knew her when she was Hawaiʻi with her first child, who I think is now 11 or 12 or something. I can't even keep up. 13? Oh my gosh. Okay, so I knew her when she was Hawaiʻi with her first child, who is now 13. And have always admired Erica's passion for nutrition with children. So I borrow many of my ideas from Miss Amanda and Miss Erica about cooking, and especially cooking with children. So Erica is the Director of Youth Education at the Hawaii Institute of Pacific Agriculture, in partnership with her husband, Dash, as well. So, just like we had Noah and Donna, we also have Erica and Dash. And so now we're going to zoom into Erica's kitchen and continue learning from her how to cook these starches and some tips and suggestions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to pin it on you. All right.
Welcome everybody. My name is Erica Kerr, like she introduced you to me. I'm so happy to be here, and it's what a partnership is with many organizations and all that we can share brought together. I'm actually in my friend's kitchen, Mama Donna Maltz, and her company is Soil to Soul, because I don't have enough good Wi-Fi and internet at my kitchen rurally, so I had to find another kitchen to cook in so it would be clear and guys, just like our food is going to be delicious and crisp today. I would love to share more about cassava. It seems like there was a lot of questions where I can share with you how I am able to prepare it. And also, we're going to keep it really easy because I'm flying by the seat of my pants here, and I'm just going to do what I would do in my home for my family when I just got to put something together. So some easy go-tos that I'm going to share with you guys today is making baked ulu, and this makes it really easy to show you guys because I didn't pre-steam this, I didn't do any of the work. I'm loving what Hawaii Ulu Cooperative is putting forth, and I'm so passionate and agree with Noah that there's no way too much ulu going in the ground. We have so much to work on with learning how and consuming these starches, and if we ever have too much, in the seconds, it goes to our chickens, our ducks, and it becomes animal feed in another way. So really versatile. Besides just for us humans, we can use it for our animals. So we're going to do baked ulu. My son loves baked potatoes, and really showing how we can use ulu just like a potato. And we're going to just incorporate some fresh herbs, and why not? Since I have this beautiful medley, we're going to add some sweet potato and maybe some pumpkin to it. And honestly, our biggest go-to, whether it's cassava, whether it's kalo, or even plantain, we eat a lot of plantain at home, we're going to show you how I make a pizza crust. And so we're going to do cassava kalo pizza crust. And one thing I want to share with you guys about cassava is that I agree that it's great grated and frozen and stored like this. But say you harvest your cassava. We've harvested buckets of cassava before, and what do I do if I don't have enough fridge space? To buy myself time and to get through to processing it over a couple days, and you have a lot of cassava that doesn't fit in your fridge, you can store it in a bucket of water or even just salt water and change out the water every day or every 2 days, and it keeps for about a week just immersed in water at room temperature. Another way that I like to do it is you take cassava when you harvest it, you peel it, and when you have the whole root raw in your fridge, it stores really well for a good amount of time, at least a couple weeks. And what I often do, and I'm going to share with you guys, the key to eating all of these healthy starches, you can buy them cooked, or if you grow them and get them raw and you want to cook them yourself, is just having it par cooked in your fridge is just the way to go. So it's ready to on hand, whether you're going to add it to a curry soup, you're going to grate it up and do a hash or a pizza crust like I'm about to show you that we cook stovetop or in the oven. And cassava, I'll also just cook it whole or in chunks, and then it's ready to grate. I do like to pre-cook my cassava usually. I know other people like to cook it up just like this, but I actually prefer to cook it in chunks and then grate it par cooked, just like how the kalo is. So let's just get started. I got my oven on. So if you guys don't have your oven on, go ahead and turn your oven on. And what we're gonna need is a baking sheet. So for baking the ulu and the other things. And then also if you have some type of skillet or cast iron are really my favorite for the stovetop pizza crust. So I wanna get the oven stuff going. And I'm-
Erica, temperature for oven.
350, 375. Let's do 375. It'll match. Okay, I just learned how to make chocolate cassava mochi, and I am in love. I am not a dessert person. I don't bake. I don't do desserts very much. But now I'm going to turn into a cassava dessert person because it's amazing and it's so easy. It's up my alley. It's like making a smoothie and putting it in the oven. So let's do that really quick, guys, because that takes 30 minutes. And then we're going to get the ulu in the oven. And then after that, I'll show you guys how we do the pizza crust. And, you know, it can be anything. I'll share more later. So let's get started on, if you have a blender, I'm going to throw in the 3 cups of cassava into the blender. And like it says on the back, they give a cute recipe. I made some coconut milk because I had some meat I pulled out of some brown nuts yesterday, so I blended it up and made my own coconut milk. So I'm going to add a cup of that. But you know what I like to have on hand, because I don't always have time to make my own coconut milk and I just need to make a recipe, is I really like to buy the frozen coconut milk. I find it superior to the canned. The canned works too, but I get this at KTA or Takata's in our hometown. We're gonna add a cup of sugar, and I just use some sukanan. I'm really excited to play with this base recipe that Sweet King Cafe has provided because I think we can do so much of it. I was inspired. I brought my rose water and cardamom because I was like, ooh, maybe I'll make a mochi that's cardamom and rose, you know? But I like it super chocolatey, but yes. And this, if you don't want to do chocolate, you can just do some type of gluten-free flour or rice flour if you don't want chocolate mochi. And you want to do more of a vanilla flavored. And then add a little vanilla. And we could add honey. We're going to add in some of the baking soda. So I asked for a teaspoon. And this is going to help fluff it up. And we're going to blend it. So maybe turn down the volume real quick. I also do want to note that I use the blender as well with plantain. So we're not featuring this, but if you have green bananas and you have too much green bananas and you don't know what to do with, all too much ripe bananas, eat them green. And what you can do is just put them in a pot and boil them. And then they're par cooked. And it's just how we're using a lot of these ingredients. I don't have the plunger, so I'm just gonna mix this up without it going so it's safe. And my kids love mochi. They always want me to buy it, but it's so sugary and artificial colored, some of them out there.
No.
I forgot to add the salt, so I just added in the salt with blending. And so it looks like a thick smoothie. So don't be alarmed. It's gonna turn out okay. And I left my baking sheets at home running out the door. So I'm just gonna use this cute little pan to make a mochi cake. And so if you have a muffin tin, it works out best to have these cute little cups. You know, also when I make ripe ulu muffins, muffin is the best form to make, you know, some type of baked ulu that's ripe as well, just like this mochi. And let me just show you here. We're gonna just stick this in the oven and get started with our ulu. That's just baked potatoes ulu, kinda. That's probably deep enough. All right, now we're gonna move on to our ulu that's baked. And you're gonna take your nice ulu that you got from your ulu box, and we're just gonna cut it into wedges. So take your ulu and you can cut it into strips. And I like this size for a wedge, not too big, not too small. But it is nice to cut them in similar size so that it can all cook evenly and brown evenly. And the other trick to making delicious baked ulu is plenty of oil, salt, pepper, and herbs. So we're gonna, I'm gonna just bake this up. And since I have sweet potatoes, we're just gonna add sweet potatoes. It's so gorgeous to say we have this baked starch of ulu that's kind of this beautiful cream color, and then the purple sweet potato, and maybe adding, if you feel like it, your orange kabocha. For ulu, some other recipes when it comes like this pre-cooked, I'd say they also recommend steaming it, and I would recommend that with other recipes besides baking it. You're going to eat it to pre-steam it to warm it up. And you know what's really easy is I just throw all my starch into the pan, and so I have less dishes. I'm always strategizing how to minimize the amount of dishes I have to wash afterwards. I honestly just toss the oil and everything in there all together. So let me just take something that I love to do when there's lots of ulu going off with your ulu tree, or if your neighbor has it, is making ulu burgers or kalo burgers. And you could do any mix. So you pre-steam the ulu, and then you just mash it up, add whatever seasonings, and you got a veggie burger. You know, you could put in some oats and it sticks together. If you have kalo, put in a little bit of kalo. You know, always adding turmeric powder to as much everything as you can, because it's here in Hawaii, and it's also really healthy for you to improve your immune system, inflammation. You know, you want to add in your black pepper when you do the turmeric, because it potentizes the turmeric in your body's ability to absorb it. Now we want to make this pretty, and since you have this beautiful sweet potato, we're just going to cube it up as well into our baked mix. Why not have purple and white baked potatoes? We're just doing chunks, so add that. to your pan with your ulu. Other things that I like to do, and you know, sweet potato would be a perfect thing to make and put into mashed ulu for a ulu veggie patty. You could mix in some beans if you want to have more protein. Just open a can or have some boiled beans. And we've taken the ulu patties, created them after we cooked the ulu and froze them, you know, in between parchment paper, and then pull it out later. And it's just so great if we can take the food that grows abundantly and nutritiously here in Hawaii and make it so it's easy to eat. And that's what the ulu flop is doing with this. And we just don't have time. And what if I added a little bit of pumpkin to add some orange? And you know, you can leave the skin on or take it off, whatever is your preference. I like the skin on. I think it's gonna help hold up. If I were to peel it, it might get a little mushy and kind of burn to the pan. So, and if I have to toss and kind of stir the baked ulu and this baked starch medley, it's gonna hold up better when I have to go stirring it around before it's all the way done cooked. Then, the most important thing, I think, is rosemary. I love rosemary, but whatever fresh herbs you have, you know, onions, chives, green onions, all of this will be great. So I didn't explain it, but for rosemary, I just go like that, comes right off. And then put it together and chop it. And I also have a little bit of pre-dried herbs. So you can use dried herbs as well. So if you have rosemary, it grows all over, pick it off of the side of the road, just kidding, in Waimea. But rosemary is a great plant. I see growing in most places in Hawaii. Also oregano, there's different types of oregano that you can grow right around or potted. And I think the key also for at least my son is he wants the onions with the, so for onions, if you have a whole onion, go ahead and cut it in half, cut off the end, and it just makes an easy way to peel it. And then you have it being able to lay flat. So all vegetables and everything, it's easy and safe when you have your vegetable laying flat on your cutting board. And we can do
You're back.
so Dash is here helping to film, and he just gave a great suggestion of how I save veggie scraps. So I made one of the best soups of my life for my family the other day. And what I did is I needed to clear out my fridge. So out of my freezer, I put my veggie scraps. So when I'm cooking, I put onion skins, onion pieces, garlic, carrot tops, celery tops, all those types of scraps you can save and, you know, pull it out of your freezer and add to it. And I just stuff up a gallon Ziploc. And then once it's full, or I have a couple bags full, I'll pull it out and boil up the vegetable scraps. If I have any chicken bones or bones that I had used, I'll cook those in there too. So I boiled this up the other day, and then I had this beautiful broth. You know, there's mushrooms. If you guys eat mushrooms, the stems or the butts of the mushroom, or say the mushrooms get a little bit off, just freeze them and you can boil them into a stock later. And so I had that vegetable stock, and then I had a nice mature, you know, ripe but not soft ulu. And then also I had, what else did I do? I had some purple sweet potato that was raw. So I cubed up the ulu and the sweet potato raw and put it into the broth and added in a little bit of green onion and some kale or collards, and it just came out so delicious. Garlic. But anyway, get back to our baked ulu.
I don't mean to interrupt, but what do I do with the mochi?
Oh yeah. So
good.
So on this, there's really good ingredients. So I took the mochi, the blended up smoothie, and you put it in muffin tins or a baking pan, kind of thinner, not too thick, because it'll be harder to cook. And you put it in your oven. So if you created your cassava blender, so I have some that's uncooked there, you're going to want to stick that in your oven at 375. So I put it in my little baking thing that's so cute for a mochi cake, and that's baking right now. And then next, I'm going to add this right here. So we have, oh, it fell. Let me see. Can you guys see? So let me see. I'm going to just do coconut oil. I know, but I want to use olive oil, but I got to open it. It's unopened. I really do love olive oil for when I'm doing things that are savory, but coconut oil is great. And when we're cooking so healthful and using these things, a number one recommendation is using high quality oil, because coconut oil is really healthy and great. Olive oil is awesome. And you know, something else I brought, this looks like coconut oil, but it's not. And I just cooked up some veggie patties I made for dinner 2 nights ago with the ulu co-op stuff that I got. And I had mixed in taro and sweet potato, I think. And I made a patty, and I heated up lard. So another easy fat for us in Hawaii is, you know, from beef or from pork, we can make lard or tallow. And that's really easy oil and fat to make up for us. Like, what are those sustainable oils? These are the sustainable starches, you know, in the base of our pyramid, like Noah pointed out. And so, you know, just taking it at one step further, there's a lot of wild pigs around, you know what I mean, that are destroying our forests. And every day I hear, if somebody sees me gardening, they tell me about their gardens. And oftentimes they'll tell me about how pigs got into the garden and ate their pumpkins or ate whatever else it is. So, you know, it's an invasive species, but there's a resource they provide. It's a food source for some people. And it's also, I think, a good fat source. I might not want to eat so much pork, but I might want to cook with it, because if you knew how much it took to make coconut oil, it's a lot of work. I just made a pint of coconut oil last week, and I juiced copra, dried coconut meat. And it's a good amount of work, and it takes a long time for the coconuts to dry. So hopefully you guys have your beautiful medley of ulu with some onions, some rosemary. Don't forget the salt. And we're gonna add that in the oven. You can do pepper as well. I love pepper, but a lot of times I use pepper at serving time. I use it less when it's cooked in, but we'll just do it now. And we're gonna add this to the oven. Okay. Oh, do you guys see your mochi cake?
Nope.
Well, if you're looking along, it's looking really nice, but it still has at least 25 minutes to go. So it's really beautiful. We've been able to just bake simply some starches. And you know what? If you had carrots, you could add some carrots to the baked ulu, and that could be delicious, or beets. I've integrated them all mixed up before, or kind of keeping it separate. And we've talked about some other things of how you could just do a patty of mashing it up. But if you're going to use the ulu from the ulu club, I would heat it up, because it's still par cooked and kind of firm. So if you get it softer, that's going to really help you for your patty. And now we're going into my family's favorite. That's my easiest go-to, which is cassava taro pizza. So if you want to take your cassava, and if you have a bowl, let's just, however much you want to cook. If you got a huge pan, you know, do that. Or if you have a little bit, we can do a little bit. But we're going to do some cassava. This is what size pan I have. I don't know. This looks like 9-inch or something. And how I like to make my cassava pizza or kalo pizza or plantain pizza or all of them combined is I like to have a lot of herbs in the pizza crust if you want. And get out your box grater. And for the box grating, what I want you also to know about cassava is that when it's cooked and par cooked and it's shredded, the more fine that it is, the more that it sticks together. So this is a regular grate, but if I were to take the cassava or here the ulu and do it on the smaller setting, when I go to pan fry it, it actually sticks together, I would say even better. We're not gonna have a problem this sticking together, but just so you know, you can play with the different texture size of the crop to get what you're looking for. So go ahead and grate up your kalo. And what's great is this is really easy to use because it's nice and firm and starchy. And I just want to also say that taro, ulu, pumpkin, it's great added into a soup broth or a stew. I mean, ulu is so great added into a stew or a chowder. Kalo, you can just slice it and fry it in some oil on each side. Like if you don't even have time to do grating like this, guys, you could easily take the bigger chunks because then less flips. I do big chunks of kalo or things like this to just pan fry. And I would just slice it this way. And I have this nice slice. And then I would heat up and I would have all these slices with some oil. I'd turn them over and then maybe melt cheese on top. So a lot of times how I get my kids to eat whatever food I make, because my kids have to eat a lot of this farm fresh food, poor things, but you know, it is different from maybe what other friends eat. And they're sometimes less comfortable taking this kind of food in their school lunches to school or used to because it's pretty different. But let's normalize it, right? Let's normalize eating kalo and uwala and this cassava and the plantain together. So let's get this kalo grated up. That's really fine. Or I can do the regular. I'm pretty good at not cutting myself.
Erica, quick question. We had the convenience of receiving these vegetables pre-cooked, the starches pre-cooked.
Yeah.
How long do you suggest or how well do you suggest roasting the cassava or the kalo if they are fresh?
Okay. So I always pre-cook my kalo if I'm going to use it into a recipe. I've never cooked raw kalo, like even into a stew. I would pre-cook it or into a soup broth. I like it pre-cooked and then cubed and added in. When it comes to the ulu, I think it's really great to just take a couple ulus, or if you have one nice big ulu, quarter it or at least halve it and put it and steam it. What's really cool to play with is the texture change. So when you cook ulu or say plantain raw directly into a soup, it almost turns out like gnocchi or dumplings, and it's like this gelatinous yumminess, okay? But if you're not looking for that texture and you just need more firmness and you want to be able to cut it, grate it, slice it, fry it, then you're gonna want to steam it. So when I pre-cook the kalo, that takes at least an hour, and it depends. And I like to cook kalo with the skin on. I don't peel it and then cook it. So I cook it with the skin on, and then after it comes out of the pressure cooker, then I peel it. But what's really great about cooking things whole is that there is going to be less, it's going to last longer in your fridge, and there's going to be less surface area for the bacteria to take over. So I have kalo that can last a long time in my fridge that I pre-cook, or say when I talked about the cassava chunks or the ulu, if I cook ulu whole, it's going to last so long in my fridge because there's not that's able to get on the inside. So that's a really great strategy if you need to cook a whole bunch and then store it, or you can share it. So I hope that helped answer everybody's questions around kalo and cassava. So we have in here the cassava that's raw and the kalo that's cooked. Okay, so it's all about the ratios that you want to do. And again, what makes a really good pizza crust is adding in some herbs and some garlic. And let's see what time is it. We're gonna get this in the pan, guys. Let's start heating your pan. Turn on your pan. Okay, get your pan getting hot, and we're gonna be adding our pizza crust. A lot of times, we eat this type of dish, whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner. You know, during school times, less so for kids, but this is an easy dinner staple for our family, or lunch, or like Dash and I, we had it for breakfast. We fried up the cassava and had an egg on top. So you can really incorporate this anytime. So next, I want to show you guys how a pizza sauce. This is tomato paste, and we're gonna add in some garlic powder or fresh
tomato paste.
Well, if you don't have tomato paste, it's okay. You can just make your cassava flatbread and then serve it with avocado and cheese on top. But I'm just gonna show you quickly how I do make a pizza sauce.
And put what on the what do we put on the tomato sauce again?
So how I make my pizza sauce is I take tomato paste and I put it in this little bowl here, and I have Italian herbs. That's oregano, rosemary, and thyme that were just kind of dried out on my countertop, and I saved and then I chopped up. And then you can add also like a pinch of salt, and we're gonna mix that up. And I also like oil. And this is my first farm manager. He taught me how to make pizza sauce, because we would do baked pizzas on the farm, and I would his pizza sauce. So this is how I make an easy pizza sauce. I like to have cans of tomato paste on hand in my cupboard usually. And just think all the lycopenes and the beneficial qualities and the health qualities of tomato is concentrated in tomato paste. So I find it very delicious, sweet. So kids like that sweetness, and that's ready to go. And then for the pizza crust, I always put turmeric in everything because it makes things healthier. All right, so I'm just mixing up turmeric, a little bit of salt. You can add oil to this base or not. I think I'm just gonna well oil the pan, okay? And since we have a higher heat, so this is cassava and kalo again, guys. All I've added is salt and turmeric. You can add whatever you want. If you love all these herbs and spices, sometimes I load up my pizza crust with herbs. Other times I don't have time. I'm always telling my kids I need more time in my life and in my garden. But let's add some oil to the pan. It's hot.
Are we mashing the crust, or how are we gonna be making the crust?
I'll show you. We have a hot pan, we have hot oil, and we have this, like this. And what's cool is that when you start to cook cassava, it sticks together. So you just need a well-oiled pan, and I mash it and I press it down, as you see, in. Maybe I'll just put this will be a thicker pizza crust, but the thickness is all up to you. And then I take my spatula and I press it down all around. I like to have it firmly in there. And what's cool about this recipe too, guys, is that when a lot of times I cook for a big family or a lot of people or potluck, I will make baking sheets of this pizza. I'll do a whole baking sheet or two and feed a lot of people and just cut up squares of pizza. But for our family, we find the stovetop and the count on the in the cast iron is the nicest. So that's cooking. And we're gonna let this cook for 5 minutes on this side. And then I just want to also show you guys, I had some leftover coconut milk here from blending up coconut meat with water and straining it through a nut milk bag. And this is the perfect thing for a curry and or like a soup broth. And the best thing it would be to like take this pumpkin and cook it into the coconut milk and then add curry powder, or if you have curry paste, and then you have this beautiful kind of maybe Thai or Indian flavored broth. And I would say for my coconut milk curry, I might want to take off the skin, or my kids would have skin in there. I would cut off the skin of the. Now, when you have too much pumpkins, you find a lot of things to do with pumpkins. So if you guys get this in your box, you know pumpkin pie. You know, pumpkin is a beautiful thing to bake with, and you can use it like pumpkin bread is delicious and all those spices, and we're approaching fall here. We are in fall actually, but it's been really hot. And I can just, cube up some pumpkin. If you have lemongrass, you could add lemon milk. Tell me.
What heat setting for the pizza crust?
What's the heat setting for the pizza crust? I say at least medium, maybe medium to high. And, something that we could, it's kind of cooking. And when it's cooked enough, maybe, you'll see it coming off of the edges in your pan a little bit. And also when you know the cassava is cooked enough, it's more translucent. So it changes from this opaque white to almost see-through. You can see it changing, so you know it's cooked well enough. And I just want to let you guys know that pizza crusts and our flatbreads are so versatile. We can use cassava, taro, green banana, plantain. I've used pumpkin less so and sweet potato less so, but I bet you can put in sweet potato into your mixture. And a lot of times with my kids, cheese is really the great way to go. So while this is cooking, why don't we prep our cheese? If you have some grated cheese, that's going to be great. I love saying that. This cheese is great.
Ha 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 ha.
Okay.
Do you prefer cassava parboiled?
I prefer cassava parboiled. I know the Sweet Cane Cafe just produces it like this for their meals, and I love it when I eat there, and it's great. But usually just what I've come to do with harvesting big batches, and how you harvest cassava is really cool when the farmers can just grab it, by the stem, and they lift up, and then you can see all this cassava that's held on. That's kind of fun when you can do that. But otherwise, harvesting cassava is just kind of shallowy digging and lifting up, and sometimes pieces break off. You got to find the other piece. But the biggest part is peeling it within the first day or maybe two, because the peel comes off easier the fresher you harvest it. If you let the peel stay on and it dries on, I find it a lot harder to peel the cassava. What do you think about that, Dash? Is it time to flip it? It's looking close. Dash is really the master of pizza crust. He makes it really good, and it's because he's patient. And sometimes I want to hurry and flip it over, but he's really patient. He doesn't worry about it burning like I do. Sometimes I don't want it to overcook, but he really lets his colo pizza crust or cassava pizza crust cook a good while on there. I'm just going to rinse my hands. Back on. Our big, so they're not done. You want it to kind of be crispier. They're still going.
Chef, if you store cassava in water, do you peel it as well?
Yeah, I peel it first, and then, okay, so look at this, guys, a little bit. So this mochi I added a good amount of oil, and let's see. It looks like it could almost be done, but I think it still has a little bit more to go. Yours might be done if you did muffin tins and didn't do it too high, you know, it's shallower. Yours might be good to go, but you just want to check. This is almost done. But I'm going to put mine. All right, guys, this is the best, coolest part right here. I usually have a cutting board, or if I'm flipping on a baking sheet to baking sheet, I do that. And we're going to flip it, guys. So take your spatula and go around the edge. See that? Oh, yeah. And then what's that? Use the wood one? It'll be fine. I'm going to just turn it over. Ta-da! All right. And then you want to have your oil. Oops. And add a little bit more oil because I just do that. And then I slide it back in. Look at how gorgeous that is. And that olena in there. Now, we're going to add our tomato paste. And if you don't have tomato sauce or pizza sauce, it's okay. You know, I just find it nice to have something moistening to eat this with. So avocado's delicious, kimchi. Sometimes you could even do something like this in soups. If your kids like ketchup, serve it with some ketchup. And they can dip it in there. Kind of whatever is going to help you to use familiar flavors to integrate these new things. So it's all about, for me, and getting kids to eat like this, is integrating familiar flavors and textures to these new foods. And I find it better than regular pizza. And someday in Hawaii, maybe you will start a pizza company using starches. And you know what? Gluten-free pizza is the hit, right? Gluten-free everything. This is all gluten-free. And now let's add our cheese. And see, you guys saw how when we flipped your cassava, it's translucent or looks cooked. If you added olena powder like me, it's hard to tell that whiteness changing as much, but you can see it's a little bit different. And we're gonna put cheese.
Some of our special toppings.
Yeah, you know, I love for toppings. What did I do the other day? You know, pre-sauteing some mushrooms and garlic and onion and adding that on top. There's also some tomatoes here from Auntie Donna's garden. Maybe she wouldn't mind me using some of these. I would add on sliced tomatoes on top. What toppings do you like, Dash?
Definitely sauteed mushrooms, some truffle oil.
Oh, yeah.
If I'm not doing red sauce.
Pesto.
Pesto is always a winner.
We use pesto a lot. But sometimes I don't always have pesto on hand. But I like to make special things of pesto. And this is really yummy. And you can decorate your pizza. And we're about done with our pizza here. We're gonna let it cook a couple more minutes. And sometimes when I have a really big cast iron, like when I make for a lot of people, I actually even use a cast iron like this big. I'll take a lid and I'll put it on top. And it kind of helps the, it might take away a little bit of the crispiness, but it makes the cheese melt faster. Usually it's not a part, but if you put the cheese on pretty soon after you flip and it's hot from the other side, that heat's really gonna help with melting the cheese. Again, if you don't have cheese, you know, avocados are just about in season. These are these little ones coming off of our trees because I'm pretty sure the trees are so dry, they don't get irrigated, but they still come out delicious. And this would be delicious on top of what you would call maybe a flatbread. So we got to learn about pizza crust, we learned about baking, and these are the most common things I do. I honestly don't bake as much during the summer and when it's hot because it heats up my house. And if I do bake, I want to optimize and I'm going to bake more than one thing. I try to be as efficient as I can in the kitchen. Imported energy sources like propane for cooking, or if you have electric and solar, then that's nice. Okay, so let's see how that sped up the process there. And I don't even have enough tomatoes to cover it all, but it's cute, right? How will you know when it's done? Let's see. It's still cooking. I guess you just don't want to burn it. Make sure you don't burn it. Any other questions I can help answer?
Thank you so much, Erica. This is so exciting. In less than an hour, we have made mochi, baked starches, and pizza crust. And folks, I think you can see how Chef Erica cooks. It isn't like a recipe. It's old school, just like how your mom did it. A little pinch of this, a little dash of that, a lot of heart and love. You can tell the love is just oozing out of Chef Erica into her food. And really, I think the lesson is seasonal and what you have, yeah, Erica. It's like, oh, this came from here, and I'm gonna go get this from the side of the road. And, you know, so I think my motivation is to have confidence in myself. As someone who is not a really experienced cook, I can only cook, my friends laugh at me. They know I can only cook 5 dishes. I think the starches are such forgiving foods that you have showed us you can basically do anything you want with them and just go ahead and practice and experiment, and it's all going to be okay. So really, yeah, just really exciting. And folks, I also dropped into the chat box the exit survey. It's just a few short questions that if you can just hop onto that and answer it. As you know, grant funding, always have to collect something. So last words from you, Erica and or Dash. Can we somehow or other get Dash on the screen too?
Say hi.
Get on.
Yeah. I just want to say, if you guys want to find more information, Hip Ag, instead of Aina Fest, our annual fundraiser, we put together a video series, and there's going to be 7 cooking videos with some guest chefs coming out in the end of November. So look for those from Hip Ag, and it goes into more detail about some of the things I shared with you today. And
yeah, it's just brought so much joy, and we've had some just incredible dinners with friends and family, and eating this way, it's inspiring, you know, and it's such a gift. It's gonna grow, and just wish everybody happy cooking adventures.
And also just knowing that you don't have to be a farmer to make a difference in Hawaii or in this world. And really the more power lies in how you consume and where you put your money and your dollars. So supporting and buying foods like this to feed you and your family is gonna really help farming and sustainability here in Hawaii excel and grow. So it's really all of us together making this happen for Hawaii.
I definitely want to do one more shout out too for Ulu Cooperative, like starch crops like this. This is all time. This is next level. Like, we're homesteaders, we're farmers. We've been growing all these crops for years. To make it accessible to the average person, be able to cook this on the regular, it's a game changer. So we need to really support this box and see this program go big statewide.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dash and Erica. Thank you so much. So those of you who are excited to join us, our next webinar is mushrooms. And so all the mention of mushrooms on today's pizza crust, how perfect is that? Our next webinar is Filling Up, is Thursday, November the 5th. It's going to be in the evening. We're going to try a slightly different format. And if you want to register, the website to register is up there. And it's the same thing. We'll figure out how each of you can get a bag of ready-to-fruit oyster mushrooms. Some of you haven't yet picked up your toolkits, so email me, or on Friday, those of you who forgot to go to Kona or Hilo, please go and get your bags of starches. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. I am just going to do a closing oli and just jump off as
This is Amanda. Can I just,
as you feel like it. Yes, Amanda.
I'm sorry, I just want to thank the County of Hawaii. Hawaii Island is sponsoring these workshops, and it's a stretch. This is out of their, these are new. So this is our, you know, your tax dollars. This is us being supported by the County of Hawaii. And I just want to really give them a shout out for believing in us. Thank you.
Uhoa ia ka makaloala. Puai ke alohala. Ku ika ihe ka kahaloala. Pavehi mai na lehua. Mai ka ho'oku ia ka halavaila. Mahalo e ke akua. Mahalo ne na kapuna la eya. Mahalo me ke alohala. Mahalo me ke alohala. Mahalo, everyone. Have a great day. Have a great lunch. Yeah, mahalo.